Okay. Okay, well, why don't we get started? So this is the November meeting of the Circle of the Dark Mother, and we do this via Witch Lab. Right now, we're completely online and recording for YouTube. Hopefully next year, we'll start going back in person, and we will also do the Zoom presentation and record, so as many people as possible can experience it. So as I said, we're Circle of the Dark Mother. We're a group that focuses on all the Dark Mothers. We mostly work with Lilith and Hecate, but we also work with pretty much any Dark Mother. So today we're going to talk about Kali. And of course, we're pretty laid back, so any questions, comments, you can either type them in chat or go off mute and ask questions. So why don't we get started? I don't have a lot of slides, but I do have quite a bit of information on each one. So who is Kali? So Kali in Sanskrit is a feminine word meaning time or the fullness of time. The masculine version is actually Shiva, and Kali is one of Shiva's consorts. So it makes sense. Most people think that Kali, and I think I say this somewhere else in here, but I'll mention it now. A lot of people think Kali means black, and that is not true. The word for black is kala in Sanskrit, but in Hebrew, one of the words for black is Kali. So very interesting that there's that connection. But black is now associated with the word Kali because of the fact that Kali is said to be black. So that's an interesting, change, that Kali did not mean black, but over time it has been associated because of the goddess. So Kali is the name of a fierce Vedic goddess who destroys evil to protect the innocent. And I use the word Vedic because Westerners use the term Hindu. And in fact, I go to India for work. I know a number of people that are Hindu, and a number of Indian people use the word Hindu now because it's been so popularized. But Hindu was actually a Western convention that was based on the Hindi River. So it is not actually the word for the religion. The reason Vedic is used is the Vedas are the first books of the religion. Later, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, and others, the Upanishads, other books have been brought into it. But it's called Vedic tradition because those are the first books that really spoke to this about and to this religion. When Kali first appears, she first manifests from the body of the god Shiva, and he's known as the destroyer. In Hinduism, there are three main gods: Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the sustainer; and Shiva, the destroyer. And if you've ever seen Shiva, Shiva's usually shown in a lotus position meditating, and his third eye is very prevalent on his forehead, and it's closed because supposedly the end of time will be when Shiva opens his third eye. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's this idea that it's the sign of enlightenment and liberation. And so it'll be the fullness of time, just like Kali means the fullness of time, so is the idea of Shiva destroying. This destruction is not destruction, it's destruction the way the world would see it, but not the way spirituality would see it. So that being said, Kali is obviously related to this same idea of fullness of time. She is considered the ultimate form of Shakti. Shakti is the Vedic divine feminine principle, and it really has to do with the force or the energy of deity. There are many goddesses that are considered Shakti. We have Parvati, Saraswati, Lakshmi, also Durga, who's another dark form. And there are actually many, many more. For instance, there's local goddesses in in the Bangalore and Mysore area, there's Chamunde, who is another very fierce manifestation of Shakti. She is Shiva's consort Vishnu's consort when Vishnu is in this lion form. So she's an extremely wrathful goddess as well. Although I will say Kali is one of the most wrathful. There are a couple others that are about her par, but most of them are not quite as wrathful as she is. And when they say she's the ultimate form of Shakti, this is saying that she is the culmination of all the other goddesses. And if you think about it, a lot of the goddesses like Lakshmi is prosperity and Saraswati is wisdom. And Parvati is really the feminine, the feminine aspect of deity and sort of her fullness. Well, then you get to Durga, who is this warrior goddess, and then you get to Kali. And Kali is really, this idea of ultimate she is the fullness of this divine feminine. She is the ultimate and the final form. And we'll talk more about what that means. So her purpose is to actually be the ultimate form of reality. And she stands for complete liberation. So she is the liberation of the soul from the karmic continuum. And this was something I found really interesting as I was studying for this. I always think of her this goddess that represents the ultimate form of reality. But in some of the texts, it actually says she is the ultimate form of reality. So it's not just her, her being a goddess. She's also a form of reality. And we'll talk more about her iconography and what that means. But this is something you see in some other traditions, like in Kabbalah, where entities actually become manifestations of, dimensions or universes. And that's really what they're pointing at, is that Kali is full enlightenment, which is so interesting because she looks so wrathful. She is usually depicted as standing on Shiva's prone body, either he is dead or he is in deep sleep. It depends on the story and the picture. And this is to show because he is the destroyer, that she transcends death, destruction, and time. Interestingly, Kali, as with others, like Tara started out as a Hindu or Vedic goddess, who later was taken up by Buddhism and became much more popular in Buddhism than she was in Hinduism. Kali also appears in Tantric Buddhism. So there are forms of Kali, some under different names, and also Kali as Kali in Buddhist practice. She's much more known in the Vedic or Hindu tradition, but she does cross. I'm going to go to the next slide, hopefully. So Kali's appearance. So she's always described as black, but when she's pictured either in statues or in artwork, she's usually depicted as blue. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Blue is usually used for the sky and transcending earth. And then the other reason they don't use just pure black is it would be really hard to differentiate her eyes, her hair, everything going on with her if she was just pure black. So even though she is depicted in narratives as black, her images are usually dark blue. Black is a color that is often associated with death and wisdom in different traditions. And so that is part of what she's associated with. But she is also eternity beyond time and space. So if you think of the idea that she is the fullness of time, she is literally eternity. And so there was actually references as I was reading that say that she is represented as the primordial void that is before and after creation. So just like in Christian Gnosticism or even Christianity, there's this idea of there was this void before anything. In Vedic tradition, she is this void before there's creation. And when creation is over and destruction occurs, there will be a void, and that is Kali. There are two forms that you will see depicted typically. Now you may see more because artists often take liberties and do different things. But the two main forms is one with 4 arms and one with at least 10. In Hinduism or Vedic tradition, typically goddesses and gods with more arms are the more enlightened version and the more powerful. So the 10-armed Kali is called Mahakali, or the Great Kali. And this is her ultimate form, where she has so many different arms because it's showing her transcendence and her power over the physical. Her eyes are often red, signifying rage and intoxication. In this one, you see them as black, and that's really, again, back to that black void, but they are often very red. Her hair is shown disheveled. Small fangs often protrude from her mouth, and her tongue is lolling. She is literally the embodiment of crazy wisdom. And she is depicted totally how you would not see women or goddesses typically depicted in Hinduism. They are usually depicted very put together, their hair either under a covering or braided, and the fact that her hair is all over the place and her tongue's hanging out, and the fact her eyes are all red and she's sort of disheveled looking is because she is supposed to be, I mean, the depictions are of her being so full of rage that she is insane. But that's a foil, because this insanity is the fact that she goes against what we naturally think of as what's normal. And this is something you see in a lot of different mystery traditions. In Gnosticism, they talk about crazy wisdom and this idea that enlightenment often looks like something that doesn't even make sense to us. And Kali is definitely one of those manifestations. She wears a skirt often of human heads and arms, along with a garland of heads and skulls. And this is, again, to show that she is death, but she also transcends it. Interestingly, I have never seen her depicted with a female head. They are always men's heads. And I think there's something to be said there about tearing down the structures of politics and hierarchy. The fact that she is female, and in Vedic tradition, women do hold a high place. The goddesses are well esteemed, but there still is a patriarchal hierarchy to marriage and family and property. And it's showing that Kali doesn't care. She just does not care. She transcends all of that. You'll see that she holds various weapons and symbols in her hands. She sometimes holds heads. She always has a lot of cutlery, because her whole purpose, of course, is this idea of cutting and dividing and rending. So she has multiple knives and swords typically. She's also holding an incense burner, which of course is usually seen as something very spiritual. She holds different kinds of spiritual items. And the big thing in this one that it shows, she's holding a trident. And that is the symbol of Shiva. He is almost always shown with a trident. And it's showing that she has taken possession of it. So she is now in control, even though the destroyer is usually the one who holds the balance of life and death. She has taken control over it. And she is the ultimate power. It's said in a lot of the writings that the male gods and goddesses see her and Durga as actually the most powerful embodiments of deity. So even though the gods in the Vedic tradition are big and bad and supposed to be all powerful, they cannot beat Kali. She is more powerful than all of them put together. So her first appearance, it's really interesting because the word Kali appears very early in the Vedic texts, but it's not written as a distinct goddess until 600 of the Common Era, which is sort of late.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, Durga appears much earlier. So there is a ferocious female presence, and there's other dark female deities, but in 600 CE is when she is finally put down in paper as a distinct entity and written about. She appears coming out of the sleeping body of Vishnu to protect the world from two demons in her first appearance. The demons are Madhu and Ketaba. Vishnu awakens, she wakes Vishnu, and he fights this long war with the demons. But he can't seem to beat them. And so Kali takes one of her forms and enchants the demons so that they can't fight anymore. And Vishnu then dispatches them. So she is the tide that turns to destroy them. In later chapters, two other demons, Chanda and Munda, attack the goddess Durga, who again is a very fierce goddess, definitely someone who should be able to hold her own. But she gets so angry that her face is said to become dark, and Kali manifests out of her forehead and appears and destroys the demons very, very quickly. She's usually, as I said, depicted as standing over Shiva's prone body. And again, this is saying that she transcends death. And so these demonic figures, which they call them demons because that's how they translate them into English. In Vedic tradition, I think it's Rakhtabhajas, they are seen as forces of nature that are inevitable, but the gods hold at bay. But some of these demons are so powerful that they cannot be destroyed by the gods. And it seems like Durga, and in many cases Kali, are raised to dispatch them. Later in the same battle, this demon Rakhtabhaja is causing all kinds of problems and cannot be destroyed. Every drop of his blood that spills creates a new version of him. So he literally clones himself every time a drop of blood hits. So the gods are fighting him, and they chop off an arm, all this blood spills, and then there's 100 more of him. So Kali manifests, and she drinks all of the blood off the ground and kills and then eats all of the clones, and then eats the demon himself. And that was the only way they could destroy him. So she is the ultimate savior in that case. There's also a story where, and I forget where this one is from, but where there's a being that gets a boon from Brahman. And Brahma says that no man can kill him. He cannot be killed at day or night. He cannot be killed by certain things. It goes on and on and on. He gets this boon where he thinks he's indestructible. Well, Kali appears. She's not a man. She does it, I think it's at dusk, right as it becomes dusk, so it's not day or night. And she uses all the things that are needed, and she is able to vanquish this dude, even though no one else could. So I'm on to the section now of working with Kali, and at this point, I want to be a little looser with because that was all history. So Brandon and James are here with me, and I don't know if they've worked a lot with Kali, but they certainly have with the Dark Mother. So I want to make sure that they're included in the conversation. And of course, if any of you have questions or just want to discuss anything, we can go there too. So the first thing I say in this working with Kali is, excuse me, Kali is a Dark Mother goddess, and she embodies crazy wisdom. So do not try to work with her if you've not done a great deal of inner exploration. I just don't really recommend that people go straight to the dark goddesses, especially in any depth, until they've done a little bit of spirituality, separate, they've done some work on themselves, and they've looked at their shadow. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect at it. This isn't saying that, you have to reach some level of nirvana before you can work with Kali. It's saying that it's just a little bit of a disclaimer of make sure you know what your darkness is, but because she's going to stir that shit up, whether you like it or not. And I know with Brandon and James, you've worked with Lilith and Hecate and many others. So I don't know if you have anything you want to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you need to be ready for change, and that change is going to push you to your greatest potential. But we have no idea what that can look like. So it could mean your house burns down. I mean, who knows?
I've had people that have worked with dark goddesses that say, oh, it was just these little gentle things here and there. And then I've heard people that their whole world just imploded. And it just, you can't predict. It's not that they're punishing anybody. It's what we need to reach this ultimate form of enlightenment.
You'll see your relationships with people fail, groups that you belong to you don't fit with anymore, and you find that you outgrow everything and everyone, and you feel alone, isolated. And that's kind of when you know something really good is happening.
Good point. Yeah, I know when I started working with Lilith, my entire world within a year completely exploded. I mean, I could go on and on about everything changed. I mean, literally. That doesn't mean that's going to happen, especially if you've already done some work. I was at a point where I hadn't really done as much as I should have, or almost any. And I even though I had worked in the occult a little bit when I was younger, I was in a Christian church when I started re-encountering her. So I needed a lot of pushing, and she took it up. She absolutely did. So really, the recommendation I have is with any, if you've done a little bit of inner work, you're ready. As with most deities, the best way to start is to read up on Kali. It doesn't have to be, again, like you have to read every text, every Hindu text or anything like that. But it's good to maybe, pull up some websites, look at what they're saying about her, read some excerpts of her story, like some of the stuff I posted. You don't have to read the whole Mahabharata, which is an extremely large book. You don't have to read the whole Bhagavad Gita, which I'm not even sure she appears in the Bhagavad Gita, but the whole point being, you don't have to read all those texts. It's more about just getting a feel, getting some kind of idea of who this being is. If you've worked with other dark goddesses, you're going to feel right at home. She's going to feel she's a slightly different emanation, obviously, so it's not going to be the exact same energy. But if you worked with Lilith, you've worked with Hecate, you've worked with Sekhmet, or any of these darker, Morrigan, any of these darker deities, you're probably going to resonate right away because the energy is really similar. I was in a Chamunde temple in India. I've never been in a Kali temple. And that's because most of southern India does not worship her. They respect her, but they do not worship her. It's mostly in Calcutta, and I've never been there. But Chamunde is a not quite as dark, but pretty dark aspect of Shakti. And I've been in that temple, and it really felt a lot like coming into a Lilith working. Different, older in some ways. And I don't mean because the deity's older, but because the veneration in that temple had gone on for hundreds of years. I think that temple was like 500 years old. So obviously there's a lot of energy there that's been built up. And there's a slightly different resonance, but it felt like home in a lot of ways. So if you've worked with the dark goddess, that will work well. I also suggest, if you're going to work with any deity, to build an altar. Doesn't have to be elaborate. I know if you've seen mine online, there's 50 statues and 100 items. You don't have to do that. I've been doing this for a very long time, and I did group, in-person group, where my house was a temple for Lilith, in Magdalene in Austin. And so I've gathered a lot of stuff. But you don't need all that. All you need really is a couple candles and a statue of the deity. Everything else is negotiable. in fact, one candle and a picture you cut out of or printed off the internet is all you have to have. But as you feel it, you can add other things. But if you have that basic altar, I would suggest sitting at the altar and meditating, because that is the best way to get in contact with the deity. Sure, you can do all kinds of offerings and rituals and the ideas are endless. But I always start when I'm working with the deity with sitting in front of them after I've studied a little bit and just trying to talk with them. Clearing the mind, doing a little bit of meditation, and letting their energy speak to you. If you're new to this, don't get discouraged. The first few times you're going to feel like you're just sort of doing nothing, but eventually that energy will start to move through you. And if you've done this before with any deity, the energy will move faster because you're used to this. Somebody once said, when you're doing this stuff, is this all just in your head? And the point is, well, yeah, it's in your head, but does that mean it's not real? I believe personally that all this is consciousness. And I believe Kali and Lilith and all these deities are consciousness. And I believe they have their own personalities and consciousness. Some don't. And if you don't, that's totally cool. But it's about our consciousness encountering a different consciousness. And that's really what, to me, this is about. So sitting and meditating and feeling that energy and interacting with it is the best way to start. And then, I know Kali is a Vedic goddess, and there's very specific ways that people in India and other places that are Hindu practice these with these deities. If you're not Indian or Vedic, you're not going to work with them in the same way. It's just not going to happen. So I would suggest finding your own way. I come from a Gnostic Kabbalistic tradition, and that's how I work with everybody. I look at it as Gnostic Kabbalah, not as a religion, but a system. And I use that system to interact with deity. If you do traditional magic, you do Wicca, you do, you do whatever you do, use the same way you work with other deities, but learn a little bit about this one. If you're going to do Kali, learn a little bit about her, sit with her, understand her energy, and then build a ritual that sort of feels right based on how you work. As I said, I think this is all about our consciousness. And that means if you are truly desiring to connect and you do something in ritual that you feel once you have this relationship built, then it's what you should do. It doesn't have to be some, go out and find some very specific Kali ritual. Excuse me. If you want to do that, that's okay. But to me, that's not as important as being true to yourself and the energy you're working with. As we already said, be prepared that she will delve deep into your subconscious and make you look at everything that you wish to hide. Her visions can be frightening and disturbing because she makes us face our own darkness. And remember, she is a death and destruction deity that involves time and enlightenment. So I've heard people talk about seeing their own death, having her dancing on their dead body,
her cutting your head off,
drinking your blood to take the quote demon unquote from you. And don't take that as, the Christian idea of demon, but take it as, the ego that's not in line with your true self, that she sucks out of your blood to purify you. I've worked with Kali a little bit, but much more with Lilith. And sometimes the visions are really, really simple, peaceful, beautiful. And sometimes they're really scary, but they're not to hurt you. They're actually to make you look at stuff. And I believe you'll have that same experience with Kali.
Yeah, like with Kali, she always brings to my mind the focus on vanity and things like that in my life, how completely pointless they are. But also, you know, she's the goddess of great boons and financial prosperity as well. So whatever she does, she accomplishes a really noble task. You just have to be willing to her embrace.
Well, I think the idea of that she is the fullness of time is really interesting because, well, I know I'm not an extremely patient person, but that's one of the things she's trying to bring is this idea of things coming when it's time for them to come. And for you to work through things in the time they're needed. You know, I think a lot of times we think, and I know I used to, that like one of these goddesses is going to come and fix us and we're going to be enlightened, you know, in some spontaneous enlightenment experience. And I'm not saying that can't happen, but for most of us, it's an ongoing
Revelation.
And a wave that comes and washes over us and deals with something and washes out. And we feel so much more uplifted, and then another wave comes and we're back into the dark night of the soul, because she, as in any of the dark mothers, are really moving through us, and that means there's going to be times it's uncomfortable, but it's the fullness of time, and that's what she's getting toward, is the fullness of who we are outside of time.
And the reality is we're born alone and die alone. And so it's really finding who you truly, truly are so you can be it outside of space and time.
And the good thing is these dark mothers will be with you. I believe they're with you at birth, and I believe they're with you at death. You know, Santa Morte being a dark mother who is an embodiment of death. There's a, and I know I'm bouncing all over, this isn't all Kali, but they all have very similar ways of working. There's a Mendian myth that Lilith's son teaches that she was not the woman that, or the demoness that people thought, but instead that she does go to women who are having trouble in childbirth, but she sits with them to help them through the birth. She doesn't change the circumstances, but she's there to hold them. And I think that's like Kali is definitely someone who is with us to hold our hand through our transformation and our death, like all the dark mothers. And just know that if you decide to work with her, just like all the dark mothers, they're not going to ever stop until you're in a realization. So you can decide you're done with them, and they're going to decide they're not done with you. So don't take upon any of these goddesses, and especially Kali, without expecting her to fulfill whatever you've asked her to fulfill. That doesn't mean we don't have ebbs and flows where you might, you know, take some time sort of easing out of your practice a little bit and running back into it. But it's not like you can ever just turn your back and be like, I'm not doing this anymore. She will follow you. Mm-hmm. So the next slide are some mantras. And I only picked a few. There's tons of them. These are all transliterations from Sanskrit into English. So the words were not written using our alphabet. They're used, you know, they're written using the Sanskrit alphabet or language. But these are written very easy to pronounce because you just pronounce every syllable. So there's one here for protection from evil forces, one to bring pure consciousness, calling upon her for, you know, great spiritual movement, the relief of complex problems, and rapid spiritual growth. So the first one, and I'm not perfect at this, I'm much better at Hebrew, but Om Krim Kali, and you can do it however you want. You can do it in your head, but Om Krim Kali, Om Krim Kali. And with these mantras, there's an idea of repeating them or doing them and going into a silent meditation. Or you can just repeat these over and over and over. And I've seen people do things like repeat them faster and faster, different ways of working with it. The next one is Om Kring Kalike Nama. Om Kring Kalike Nama. And again, that's bringing pure consciousness. Calling upon it for great spiritual transformation. Om Sri Maha Kalikaya Nama. Om Sri Maha Kalikaya Nama. And you notice there's some very similar pieces in these. Om is supposed to be the sound, in Buddhism, they say it's the sound of the primordial sound of creation. So that's being used also in Hinduism. It comes way before Buddhism. Kali, of course, is her name. Maha it has to do with great. And some of these words I don't know their exact translation. But these are all ones that you'll find over and over again in different books. The next one for relief of complex problems. Om Klim Kalikaye Nama. Om Klim Kalikaye Nama. And then the last one for rapid spiritual growth is Om Hrim Shrim Klim Adya Kalika Param Eshwari Swaha. And that one's a little harder to do over and over because you will get tongue-tied very easy. When I work with Kali, I try to use just the Om Krim Kali, not because I'm just doing protection from evil forces, but I do that because it's short and it's easy and it lets me call to her.
And it's her presence.
It is. Or you could just even do Om Kali, Om Kali, Om Kali, Om Kali, Om Kali, and keep doing that over and over just to bring her presence. So as I said, you can use these individually, you can use them as part of a ritual, you can repeat them over and over again. When I do stuff with Lilith, I will do that sometimes as my whole meditation. I will just call upon her with different Hebrew words, not Sanskrit in that case. I will do a ritual where I'll use a mantra to her. Sometimes I will just do it as a beginning before I go into a meditation. I don't know why I'm coughing. I haven't been coughing till we started doing this, of course. So those are some mantras that can be used with her. And then I think my last slide are some books. There's tons of books on Kali, being a goddess who's been around for a long time, but there are a few that I really thought would be helpful. So Kali Mantra Magic by Bal Kadman is really good. He has it's not very big, but he has a whole book of mantras. So if you're really into mantras, that can be really helpful. There's a really good book called Shakti Rising, which is about this power that has a lot of Kali information. And this is by a person who's Indian. And then the Devi Mahatmayam is actually the first text that references Kali, that one from 600 AD or CE. And you can get various versions of that in English. So if you want to read the stories that have her in it, you can also get that. And as I said, there's many, many other books that either are all about her or partially about her, because if you buy almost any book on Hinduism or the Vedic tradition, you'll get her as part of it. There's also a number of books that are about the dark mother goddess, and those will often have her in it also. Okay, so that is all I have. So I'll turn it over for any questions or comments or anything anybody wanted to discuss.
I have a friend who every time she's a psychic medium, and every time I'm around her, she sees Kali with me, except when Kali is appearing with me, she's Kali Ma. That mother energy is there as well. And let me tell you the way my life goes. Yeah, she likes to destroy before I can. And that's the other thing my friend told me. She creates, destroys, rebuilds.
Mhm.
And that's the phrase she always sees when she's reading me. And yeah, she's real good at destroying and still rebuilding. So I trust her. But anytime my friend goes, hey, yeah, message me, yeah, Kali Ma, she's there for you again. I'm like, shit, what's gonna happen now? Like, I know something good will eventually come out of it, but it's almost always something gets blown up in my life. It's dramatic. It's not like, oh, you won the lottery. It's like you said, your house burnt down, then you won the lottery.
You got money for your house burning down, and it's gonna turn out great, but your house burned down.
Exactly. But I find it interesting because I don't see, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen her reference as Kali Ma. It's rare. I've picked up on it, but she's very insistent when she's appearing for me that the mother energy is there too.
Yeah, and that was one thing I debated putting in here, is there's a number of different manifestations of Kali. It's sort of like, well, like a lot of the Greek deities, they would have, the Greek and Roman, they would have their name, but they would have all these titles for them. And so there would be, and each one was a different manifestation. And that's true of Kali as well. And so Kali Ma is, as you said, is the mother aspect. But a lot like I see Lilith, where she's not the mother who's gonna, hug you and say everything's gonna be okay. She's the kick your butt mother. You fall down and she's like, get up.
Oh yeah.
She does comfort you, but at the same time, it's not quite as maybe as easy as the brighter aspects. But yeah, Kali Ma is, I know a term in Western tradition that they use quite a bit, because obviously you hear Kali Ma and we automatically understand what it means. Where some of the other manifestations, if you don't know Sanskrit, you're like, what is that? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think that is common, because I really always see the dark, the dark goddesses to me are always the dark mother. They're not just these dark deities. They are coming as our mother.
And they've been a mother to millions of people.
Yeah. So when you
my mother is absent in my life, so I feel like they have sensed that. And I had a bad mother, and we're estranged for good reason, but I feel like they're filling that hole. But man, they're tough.
Yeah, and I had a very difficult childhood with a mother who was, and I think sometimes when we have that experience, we are more prone to the dark mother, because we can't, I don't know about you, but I don't trust the bright mother. And I don't mean that on a mental, intellectual level. There's a part of me that instinctually does not trust someone that's all just, sweetness and light, because that was not my experience of a mother. So the dark mother tends to, I think, come to us more because, not because, again, it's not punishment, it's not negative, but because we need that darker one to know that it's really love. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but that's at least how I see it in my life. And I do believe that they're coming to us saying, your experience wasn't too good, but that doesn't mean you can't have a strong mother who really does love you. So I totally understand. I have the same exact experience. And they are tough because they see, it's like the mother that sees your full potential. And she wants you to get there. And she feels, it's sort of like when you're in school and you think that, it's so bad if you get held for detention or you have to do extra work because you don't want to do it. It seems painful. But in the end, if you have a parent who really knows that it's good for you and you're intelligent and you can get there and you can become so much more, they'll push you. Well, that's what the Dark Mother does. She knows that this life can be hard, but if she pushes us, we will transcend.
And we notice the reality of it as an illusion. We won't play with it as much.
At first, it's really sucky. At first, it just is so awful. But
yeah,
you do start to see the and not saying there still isn't suffering in the midst, but you start to see it as a wave that's coming and going, and it will pass and it will be better. And I really believe that when your friend sees her there with you and you're like, oh crap, what's coming next? She's not just there. She's not there because she's bringing the tough stuff. She's there because she knows it's coming and she's going to help you transcend through it.
yeah. And I think that's probably why makes sure she's so insistent on the ma. Like, make sure you tell her Kali Ma is here, not Kali Ma.
Yep.
It still sucks, but
yes, it does.
And it truly, it has gotten to that point where I look at it as just, hey, I have to get through it. There's something I'm supposed to learn here, and it's gonna be tough, but oh well, something is on waiting for me on the other side.
Well, isn't that why it's crazy wisdom? Because I'm not saying, we're like whistling and going, yay, suffering. And it's not to say that we have to have suffering, but it's the knowledge that even if we are, there's more. And that's why she seems so, all the Dark Mothers seem so crazy, because the fact that it's about getting through stuff, it does not make sense that it's going to be okay. It does not make sense that we're going to get through it and that we're going to be stronger for it. Even if it's the end of an incarnation, we'll be stronger in the next one. And so they appear in such a way that it appears like it doesn't make sense, because it doesn't. Reality, the way our cultures and our psyche looks at reality, we want it to be all, pretty and easy, and it just isn't. So understanding that is crazy wisdom to a degree.
Yeah, that crazy wisdom, when I saw that really resonated.
It's something that I've seen so much through my journey with the Dark Mothers, because they'll also tell you to do things that don't make sense. And I don't mean like something destructive. I just mean, I've had times where they'll tell me, take a job that seems like a bad idea and it turns out to be amazing. Well, like I was in the church, and to leave that, which was hard, but it absolutely was the right thing to do. So yeah, it ends up being this beautiful thing, but during it, it's our ego doesn't like it. And they look destructive. Like she appears black and with bodies, because it almost feels like death. We're transforming, and that looks like death to us.
But that's kind of like the death card in the tarot.
Yes, exactly.
Which I got out of the little Witch Lab card machine last weekend, and my friend went, "Oh no." And I said, it just means there's some sort of change coming.
Right.
No biggie.
Right. I would rather get the death card than the tower. And that's
what I said.
Awful.
You are some
That's-
card for poverty.
Yeah, I take
Yeah,
the best.
exactly.
Death over poverty. Give me death.
So other questions or comments? Hey, I just saw some people join. We're just ending, but if you want to talk about anything with colleagues, certainly welcome to.
Oh. Okay, you're just ending?
Yeah, it started at 6:30.
Oh, it says 7:30 on
Oh,
the thing. It says 7:30.
oh,
and
I wonder how
it's-
that happened.
It's 7:30 now. Okay.
Well, I wonder why everybody else joined at 6.
Well, but a whole bunch of people are joining at 7:30, so it might be in different places.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe it showed.
Maybe.
Well,
Okay.
you know,
All right.
we can, you know, I know a couple people were on to start with, so if you want to go through it again, we can. Let me back up here because we're getting a lot of people now, so let me back up. Sorry about that.
That explains, I think I did see it earlier this week at 7:30, but when I checked it tonight, it said 6:30. So I wonder if it's posted twice.
That's a great
Maybe.
question. Oh, you know why? The time change.
That might have been it.
Time change.
Yeah, it's probably the time change, but that's okay. I am totally fine to go back through this. So, Rachel, I know you've been on for the whole time, so it's up to you if you want to stay for another round. But since a few people have joined, I'm totally cool going back through.
I'm great. My dinner just arrived, so I'm gonna head out.
No
but
problem. You were here
we'll
for
enjoy it.
for version 1, so
And I can watch the replay.
yes, absolutely.
Have a good night, guys.
Take care. Well, welcome everybody. Sorry about that total confusion here. I think the time change messed up the calendar because our meeting's usually at 6:30, but with the time change, I think it went a little bit off. So totally okay to run through it again. I've got the Skype thing going for 2 hours. We just did about an hour on Kali, and we'll go back through the slides and do it again. So totally happy to. I am always up for talking about the Dark Mother. So if anybody's watching the recording after this is done, this is round 2 because of a time change issue. And so it'll be the same slides, but the discussion may go different places. So welcome everybody. Let me see what time it is. I was not paying attention to that before.
7:28.
Okay, we'll give it a couple minutes to actually get started because if anybody else is coming at 7:30, we'll give it a little bit of time to let them join. Yeah, I think, Lindy, I see the, sorry, the time change got me. I think it got all of us. So totally happy to go back through this. As I said, anything with the Dark Mothers, I can talk forever. So we'll just wait another minute or two to see if anybody else joins.
So this is my first time attending one of these. Do we wait until after the presentation is over with to ask questions, or can we ask questions as the presentation is being given?
Great question. And we are very, very easy. So if there's any pause and you want to jump in, I usually, if we have enough people on, I will try to pause after each slide to see if there's questions. So totally okay to jump in at any point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome. I see a couple people saying this is their first time. Welcome. So I'll start with sort of the disclaimer at the beginning. We're Circle of the Dark Mother, and we are a group based, of course, in Columbus, Ohio. And we focus on specifically the Dark Mother goddesses. There's three of us, Brandon, James, and I. We work mostly with Lilith and Hecate, but we do many other areas, and we work with pretty much all the dark goddesses. Our paradigm is Gnostic Kabbalah, sort of as the framework. So that's sort of where we come from, but that does not preclude that any way you work, whether you're traditional witch, Wiccan, some other spiritual paradigm, totally works. So, don't feel like because I'm coming from one direction that means that's the only way. There's many, many ways to work, and we'll talk about that as we go. Our meetings are usually the first Sunday of every month at 6:30 p.m. EST. And right now we're doing it only on Zoom, and then we record it and put it on YouTube. We used to, and we will again, hopefully next year, we will also be in person at Witch Lab for anybody that wants to attend. And then we will also still do it online and record it so that anybody who's not in the area or couldn't come can experience it. We're hoping to start back in February at Witch Lab, but that'll depend, of course, on everything. Okay, I'm just going to give it one more minute before we actually dig in. Sure. We may also, as I wanted to mention, nothing happens in a vacuum. And since our experiences, some of them are with other dark goddesses, we may bring them in also. Just because, like personally, most of my experiences with Lilith, I do work with other dark goddesses, including Kali, but most of my experiences with Lilith, because she's my patron. So, so I may bring up things with her that are applicable to Kali, and as we go, I'll explain that. We are completely open to all ideas. So again, we give information from our experience and our study, but that doesn't mean that's the only way or the only information. So if you have different information, what we say does not invalidate it. Okay, I'm going to get started with the presentation. So as I said, this is the November meeting of Circle of the Dark Mother, and our topic tonight is Kali. Can everybody see the presentation, by the way?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So who is Kali? So the word Kali is a Sanskrit feminine word meaning time or the fullness of time. That being said, and hold on one second. That being said, there is also Kali as a name, which is the name of a fierce Vedic goddess who destroys evil to protect the innocent. Now, when I say Vedic, that's because Westerners call the religion Hinduism. That was based on when Westerners came into India, they found a river called the Hindi, And so they called the religion Hinduism. The tradition, though, is often called the Vedic tradition because the Vedas are the first books that were written down that are from this tradition. I will use both the word Vedic tradition and Hinduism, and they mean the same thing. So Kali first manifests from the body of Shiva. In Hinduism or in the Vedic tradition, there are many gods and goddesses. There are three primary gods: Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, and Shiva, the destroyer. Brahma is said to be the one who brought creation into existence. Vishnu is the god of time in between the creation and the end. And Shiva is the god who will bring about the destruction of the universe. He is said to be sitting in meditation, and he has a third eye that's very prominent on his head, that when that eye opens, that reality will cease to exist. And the reason being is the third eye, of course, represents enlightenment. And so when his third eye opens, it's the idea that all of the worlds will become enlightened. And so physical manifestation will end. But it's interesting that Kali manifests from his body, being the destroyer and also the god who is sort of the one to bring about enlightenment. His name, one of his epitaphs is as the masculine word meaning time or fullness of time. So Kali is one of his consorts. He's most often seen with the goddess Pavarte, but Kali being sort of the ultimate form of this goddess. Kali is considered, as I said, the ultimate form of Shakti. Shakti is the Vedic principle of the divine feminine. So all of the goddesses are Shakti. And Shakti is the primordial essence of all the feminine energies. Kali, being the ultimate form, is because she is the final product of this feminine energy, which is the fullness of time. If you think about the idea that the feminine archetype is often seen as, of course, birth, because of the bringing forth of children, well, then Kali is the end. She is the fullness of time where everything is fulfilled. A lot of people think that her name Kali means black, and that's because even though it does not mean that, it means time or fullness of time, the word Kala in Sanskrit means black. And Kali, being a deity who is colored black, and we'll talk a little bit about the coloring and stuff in a minute, but she is associated with black. And because of that, then her name has also been associated with black. So even in Hindu culture, Kali is thought of as a word for black now, even though it originally was not. So when Kali appears, she's usually depicted as standing on Shiva's prone body. This is to show that she is over death. She transcends it. She is the ultimate goddess that can basically destroy anything and can transcend anything. Shiva is seen as one of the most powerful deities because of his third eye, the enlightenment that he brings, and the fact that he's the end of everything. But she can stand on him either in death or in unconsciousness, where she prevails. And that means that even though he destroys, she is what will remain. There is also forms of Kali under that name and other names that appear in Tantric Buddhism. This is interesting because, for instance, the goddess Tara was originally a Hindu goddess who later got picked up by Buddhism. Kali is more popularly known from Hinduism, but she does appear in Tantric Buddhism. So you may hear her name or other names like hers if you do any study into Buddhism. Any questions anybody wants to ask just about the basics that we just covered? Okay, let me go to the next slide. So Kali's appearance. So in writing, Kali is always depicted as pure black. But when she's depicted in art, she is usually dark blue or just blue. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, even though her actual form is supposed to be black, that's very hard to depict in a two-dimensional medium because you wouldn't be able to see any differentiation. You just see this black spot, that would be on the paper. So they use blue because blue is the color of divinity based on it being the sky, the color of the sky. And so that is a color that they depict in art most often for gods and goddesses. But again, she is black, completely black when she's written about. And the reason that she's depicted as black is because black is often associated with both death and wisdom. She is the eternity beyond time and space. A number of traditions talk about this idea of this void that exists before creation and often after creation. And Kali represents this primordial void before and after everything. So before there's anything, there's Kali. After there's everything, there's Kali. What's interesting too is she is depicted in some of the texts as not just being a goddess, but also being sort of a universe of herself, meaning that she is beyond just a being. She is a dimension, a place to exist that takes form. This is something you'll see in some other traditions. Gnosticism, for instance, talks about this idea of beings that represent universes or periods of time or something that seems intangible. And Kali is also one of these kinds of deities. She has two forms that are usually depicted, one with 4 arms and another with at least 10. The 10-armed Kali is called Mahakali, which means great Kali. In Hinduism and Hindu art, the more arms, the more powerful, the more enlightened, the more they transcend reality. And so the 10-armed Kali is being the great Kali is sort of the ultimate form of this deity. She is, supposed to be the manifestation that is beyond everything. You'll also hear many other names for Kali, much like other traditions, like in Greco-Roman tradition. They would give names to gods and goddesses where they would take their main name, but they would also use other attributes to explain different aspects of them. Well, Kali's like that. There's just Kali, and then there's these other forms like Mahakali. There's also Kali Ma, which is her motherly form, and many others. We're not going to go delve into all of them because there's lots, and most of the words are Sanskrit that wouldn't really mean a lot to us. But just understand that there's all these manifestations of her. Her eyes are often depicted as red, signifying rage and intoxication. In this picture, you'll notice they're black, which is the second most often depicted color for her eyes. The black being the idea of a void or a darkness. Her hair is shown disheveled. She often has small fangs protruding from her mouth, and her tongue is lolling. She is depicted as fierce, wild, and not quite sane. And this is to show a couple of different things. First, if you see images of most of the Hindu goddesses, they will be very put together with, very elaborate saris, their hair either up with a head covering or braided or in some very sort of traditional fashion. And they definitely won't have their tongue hanging out. But the idea here is that Kali is crazy wisdom. She is beyond all of the traps of society. She is beyond any kind of control, and she does what she wants. Crazy wisdom is something, again, that you hear in other traditions. This idea of enlightenment being so different than the way we see things as a society. that it seems crazy. It seems insane. It seems like it's not the way you would think. Certain depictions will show things about, reality being upside down or inside out, or some picture that shows that it, in an enlightened state, things are not the way they seem. And that is part of the reason Kali has this depiction. She often wears a skirt of either human arms or human heads and arms, along with a garland of either heads or skulls. This is to depict that she is death, but she also transcends death. You will notice, and in almost all the pictures, the heads are always men. And that is important. Even though in Hinduism, there are many goddesses, and they are just as important as the gods, Indian society is patriarchal in a lot of ways. Women typically go live with their husband's family. The husband is the one who owns property. Things are changing in these times, but traditionally this is how it went. And the heads of men are to show that she is beyond all trappings of society. She does not bow to anyone who's in power, or anyone, even the gods, which of course is shown with her standing on Shiva's body. That's pretty powerful, showing that she, transcends even the destroyer. She always holds a number of different objects, and these objects all have very different meanings. She does hold a lot of weaponry because she is a warrior goddess. She does fight with what are translated to demons. We'll talk a little more about that in a minute. So she has swords and knives and arrows and bows and things like that. She also holds things that show symbolism of spirituality, like a censer that has incense in it, something very important in Vedic tradition. Seashells are very important because of being able to hear the ocean, and the fact that, India is a peninsula or a subcontinent that sticks out into the water. Water is very important. The other thing, she will hold human heads and other objects. The thing that's really important that you see in this depiction is she holds the Triton. The Triton is a symbol that is Shiva's. Shiva is the god who holds a Triton, and it is his symbol of power and dominion. In this picture, Kali is showing that she holds the dominion when she is around. Shiva has no power over her either. So he is unable to destroy her. And in fact, when he does destroy by opening his third eye, she is who holds dominion. She is a very fierce and wrathful deity. And we'll talk more about what that means in a minute. Any questions or comments about the appearance? Okay, let's go to the next slide then. So Kali's first appearance. So she's mentioned in many Vedic texts. The word Kali appears, and sometimes it's unclear whether it's referring to a deity, but it doesn't go into any kind of details. The first actual written account as her as a distinct goddess was written down in 600 AD or CE Common Era. That's really interesting because there's a lot of evidence that Kali has been around a lot longer than that. But the first time that a writing was put down with her name was in the 6th century in this book called Devi Mahatmayam. Devi is another word for the goddesses. The goddesses are always called Devis. So that is, it's definitely a book about goddesses. So in this book, Kali first appears coming out of the sleeping body of Vishnu to protect the world from two demons, Madhu and Ketaba. So we should probably talk about demons briefly. In Judeo-Christian tradition, demons are these fallen angels or these demonic entities. In Hinduism, there is no such thing as hell. and there's no fallen angels. I believe that the demons, the word in Sanskrit is Rakshasas, and they're really seen as beings who hold sway over physical reality. They're forces of nature, they're embodiments of darkness. So similar to the idea of demons, but since there's no hell, they're not quite the same as in a Christian perspective, but they definitely come to taunt and torment humanity. They also seem to torment the gods. So in this case, these demons come, threaten the world, and are causing all kinds of havoc, and Vishnu's asleep. And obviously he sleeps pretty sound because they don't wake him up. So Kali appears coming out of his body and rouses Vishnu to fight them. Vishnu fights a long war with the demons, which goes on and on and on, and he can't win. He can't seem to beat them. But what happens then is Kali transforms into another form, another one of her forms, and she enchants the demons. So she basically hypnotizes them. And in that moment, they don't fight back or defend themselves, and Vishnu is able to kill them. In later chapters, two other demons appear to the goddess Durga. And Durga is another manifestation of the divine feminine. She's often depicted sitting on a tiger or a lion. She is also a warrior goddess, usually with many arms, holding much weaponry. She fights demons too. But obviously these demons are too much, and they come and try to hurt Durga. Durga becomes so angry that her face becomes dark, and Kali manifests out of her forehead. So there's definitely imagery here of Durga's anger, righteous anger, turns into this power of this divine feminine force that's beyond creation, comes forward, and she very quickly destroys both of the demons. We already mentioned that she stands on Shiva's prone body, showing that she transcends death, that she's more powerful than even Shiva the destroyer. Later in this same battle, another demon comes who's named Rakhtabhaja, and he's unbeatable. And the reason he's unbeatable is every time Shiva or one of the other gods attacks him and they draw blood, every drop of blood turns into a duplicate of Rakhtabhaja. So you think about it, you go fight this guy, you cut him, blood is everywhere, and each one of these becomes another version. Pretty soon you have a whole army of clones of this demon. And none of the gods can destroy him. They keep trying to hurt him, and he keeps making more. So Kali eventually manifests, and she drinks all of the blood from the battlefield and then eats each of the clones and then the demon itself. And so he can't reproduce because there's no more blood. This is back to this idea that she is this void that transcends. This idea of her eating them, obviously if she just took a bite out of them, they're gonna bleed. So somehow she absorbs them. She pulls them into this darkness that is her, and they can't do anything. So really, Kali, even though she's been around for a long time, isn't really put down in the literature until the 6th century. But when she does appear in the literature, it's pretty powerful. In a number of references to her, they talk about the fact that all of the male gods undisputably say she is the most powerful, and they defer to her, mostly because they know she could kill them as well as anything. There are stories too where she becomes so enraged during a battle that they sort of have to talk her off the ledge because she's going to go destroy everything, and they have to calm her down and bring her back. And then she usually either disappears or reverts. If she's one of the other goddesses, she reverts to her more peaceful form. Any questions or comments about that? Okay. Oops, went too far. So far we've talked about history, and we've talked a little bit about Kali and her place in Vedic tradition. So just some other background. I because of my job, I go to India. I've been to India maybe 7 or 8 times. Have not been lately because of COVID. I have been in many temples, but I've never been in a Kali temple. And the reason is because Kali is not worshipped in most of India. She's known, she's respected, but she is not worshipped many places other than Calcutta. And I've not been to Calcutta, so I've not been in one of her temples. I have been in other dark goddess temples that are the dark version of Shakti. For instance, in Mysore, India, there's a temple to Chamunde. Chamunde is the consort of Vishnu, the sustainer, when he becomes wrathful and becomes in a lion form. So Chamunde is similar to the idea of Kali, is that she's a manifestation of the goddess in a wrathful form. These female goddesses that are all dark always are demon hunters. They are always created to destroy these demonic entities and protect the world. And this is really to represent this idea that they are, as the fullness of time or the void of enlightenment. They are seen as what dispels that which is not real, that which is not really serving. And with us, it's the part of us that is not our true self. They're there to vanquish the ego so that the true self and enlightenment can manifest. So as we speak about that and we get into working with Kali, so first of all, I always have a disclaimer when working with dark mother goddesses. I say the same thing when I'm talking to people about Lilith or some of the other ones like the Morrigan or Caradwin, Sekhmet. To a degree, Hecate, she's a little more approachable than some of them. But I always say they embody crazy wisdom. You should never try to work with them if you've not done some inner exploration, meaning they're gonna pry and poke until they find the stuff you don't want to even admit to yourself. So just be ready. So if you're someone who's not done a lot of spiritual practice, definitely do some inner work before you go full on try to encounter these dark goddesses. And definitely that's true with Kali. She can be pretty intense. So what I wanted to do now is, as we talk about, Kali being this dark mother goddess of crazy wisdom, I know Brandon and James had experience working with Lilith and Hecate, so I wanted to see if they had any insights or just anything they wanted to share.
The dark mother brings about your truest, most heartfelt wishes. And she's the queen of boons, but she's the queen of working through everything that's holding us from our true potential. So while she's rough and difficult initially, we have to surrender to her and have faith in her grace. And she gets us through it. And in the end, we come to our, most perfect self.
I'll say it's like the Greek Kali.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you could hear James. He said that Kali is like the Greek, Hecate is like the Greek Kali. Sorry, I had that backward. And very true. Being the one who takes you through the caves into the hell realm, into the afterlife, and guides you out with her torch. Definitely these deities are about birth, death, and the afterlife, and about our soul's transcendence.
You just really have to surrender to her wisdom, which is greater than your wisdom, and just really put in the work of trying to realize what it is you need to realize and not making the same choices that you had been making. Be committed to change.
If you want to work, definitely if you want to work with Kali. So as with many, and I'm sorry for the coughing, I have not been coughing till we started on this presentation, so I think I've been talking too much, but as with most deities, I recommend that if you're going to start working with Kali, a good way is to build a simple altar. And if you've seen my altars, mine are quite complex. It doesn't have to be that complex. Mine are complex because I've been doing this for years and years and years. And I also ran a group in Austin, Texas, where my house was our temple. So I've acquired a lot of stuff, but you don't need that. All you really need is a candle and an image. You can have a statue, you can even print out a picture from the internet. It doesn't have to be fancy. The fancy is not usually for the deity, it's for us, because it helps our consciousness to connect better. But if you have a candle and an image, you can start. And the way I suggest working with a deity is build an altar, spend some time with them, maybe sit at the altar and meditate on their image, get to feel their energy. I definitely think it's also good to read up on any of the deities you're going to work with. That doesn't have to be, a 10-year study of every text that mentions them. It's more about just reading enough to get a feel of their personality.
Sit in front of her image and study and read books. That's a great way to get insight, because she's going to be able to give it to you right there.
Exactly. So, a simple altar, a little bit of meditation, some reading. And then as your devotion grows, you can get into offerings with Kali flowers, incense, food, water. With dark goddesses, bones can be used. But it really comes down to what you offer them is what you feel is the right thing to offer to them. I know there are people that have very, very detailed practice where they offer very specific items, and that's fine. I'm not dissing that. But for me, it's sort of in the moment, what do I feel is being called to offer?
Well, you want to give back to her, so you want it to be heartfelt and genuine as well. You don't want to give her something just because somebody else gave her saffron. You want to give her what comes from your heart to give her. Because that's going to make the most movement.
Absolutely. And the next thing I say is, you can then follow with ritual, with Kali, if you're working with Kali, as the focus of it. And when I say ritual, unless you were, you either were born or studied Hindu tradition or Vedic tradition, you're probably not going to do it the way somebody who grew up in that tradition. Yeah, I mean, you're just not, because that's not your culture, that's not your experience. I really believe as long as you're being respectful and you've built a relationship with the deity, however you work is the right way to work. I work in a Gnostic Kabbalistic methodology, and so I have a specific way I do ritual. Of course, if I was, when I work with a specific deity, I change things somewhat to match that deity. I might use some Sanskrit words. I might do some things that I know are specific, that I've read are specific to Kali, but I'm still going to work in the basic paradigm. If you work in a traditional witchcraft methodology, you work in Wicca, you work in, whatever, you work the way you work, because that's going to be the best way for your consciousness to connect.
If you call on her name and do the work, she's going to be there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. And that's why I say build the relationship and then work the way you work. Excuse me. I think too that, and I totally lost my train of thought. it was going to be about the way you work. Oh, so for me, this is all about consciousness. You know, I believe deities are consciousness. Now, I believe they have their own personality, their own consciousness, but we have ours too. And I personally believe these are interactions of consciousness, and it's about our consciousness meeting this other entity, and it changes us, and we move based on that. So I think, again, that's why I think it's really important to work the way you work. You know, it's okay to get ideas out of books and get ideas of how to do things, but as time goes on, really make it be the way it works for you, not just the way someone told you to do it. Because I think it'll mean more if you work in a specific way or you feel a certain way for you to do that than to just follow steps out of a book. Now, that might be how you start, and that's totally okay. But in the end, it needs to be your movement.
And she transcends any religion, or, you know, when you
Yeah.
look at her hair, disheveledness, not conforming. So she doesn't conform to anything either. So you can be Wiccan, you could be Buddhist, you can be anybody and appeal to her.
Absolutely. The Dark Mothers tend to be the ones that care the least
About convention.
about convention. In fact, they want you to throw convention up in the air. And they want you to be you, the true you, who you really are. And with that, be prepared that she will delve deep into your subconscious and make you look at everything that you wish to hide, even from yourself. Her visions can be frightening and disturbing because she makes us face our own darkness. That being said, I've heard people that have worked with Kali see her dancing on their body instead of Shiva's. You know, you being dead and her there. I know Brandon said earlier, you know, her cutting off your head to put it on her garland or on her skirt. Now, this is not punishment. This is the big mistake people make with the Dark Mothers. They think if some image is very dark, that it's meaning they're being punished, but it's usually symbolic of some kind of movement. Like the idea of cutting off the head is to bring about enlightenment. It's to let go of conventional thought. And if she's adding you to her skirt of heads, well, you're becoming part of her.
Quite an honor.
Yeah, so I'm not saying it isn't scary, because it can be. I've had dreams with Lilith where I'm like, wow, that was really intense. And sometimes I need to then step back a little bit to process.
I had a dream where Naama cut my head off and put her head on top of my body. And, you know, if you just seen it in a dream, maybe it would have been scary, but I understood what it meant.
That she's becoming you, you're becoming her, right? And they will work in some of this dark imagery. And now that doesn't mean some people have very, you know, much more tame dreams with Kali. I'm not saying you're going to first out of the bat, you're going to be beheaded or something. I'm just saying it can happen. And understand if it scares you, that's okay. But then look at the deeper meaning and understand why she's saying what she's saying.
Ask her to reveal to you what it means.
Right, right. Really, the visions are all to make us look at our own darkness, to deal with our ego and find out who we really are. And once you start working with her, she's not going to stop until you find your inner realization. Kali and Lilith and all these dark goddesses, once you start working with them, they consider that a deal, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you don't start working with them and then just say, I'm done, because they're not going to be done with you. So if you start working with them, make sure that your intent is very clear of what you're trying to do, and that you know, you're willing to the transformation. Or if it's just a little sidebar into learning about them, make sure that's clear in the intent when you're working with them. For instance, you know, I'm a devotee to Lilith, so she is the main goddess I work with. I do work with other goddesses and other deities. And when I do, I always make it very clear in my intent that I'm not trying to, you know, move away from Lilith. This is a sidebar. And you know, that's just the way I work because it makes me feel more comfortable. It makes it clear to my consciousness, and it makes things go a lot smoother. So again, just know that they're serious about your transformation and they want you to be too. Okay, before I move on to the next slide, any questions or comments? And I do want to make a comment that, you know, I make this sound pretty intense, and it can be, but these are the extremes. You know, I don't think any deity is expecting you to, the first day you talk to them, to be, you know, bonded for life, and that, you know, they're going to start giving you dreams of every way you can be killed. I'm not trying to suggest that at all. It's just when you start working with them, it can get intense, and there is transformation. So be prepared. But that's not to scare you away. It's to give you insight into what can come. So another good way to work with Kali is mantras. And mantras are you know, phrases or names that you repeat usually. I will use mantras before meditation, as meditation, or before a ritual. I'll say it before I go to bed as a blessing. And these are all in Sanskrit, or are transliterated from Sanskrit into English words or English letters. Other deities, you may use a different language. For instance, I use Hebrew a lot with Lilith. I could use Sumerian, but I don't really know Sumerian, so I use Hebrew. But with Kali, Sanskrit's a really good way because that's the language that was used in the writings on her and is used primarily in her worship in her native lands. So, as I said, mantras can be repeated, or they can be, you know, just said once. You can do it just as a saying it, or you can sort of intone it, which means it's almost like a singing kind of way. Because these were written in Sanskrit and now they've been transliterated into English letters, that means that they're phonetic. Same thing when we transliterate Hebrew. Hebrew has its own alphabet. So when you transliterate it into English, you make the sounds in English letters. So with these transliterations, you repeat every, you know, every piece of the word because it's phonetic. So for instance, and I'm going to do this as an intonement, for this first one, it would be Om Krim Kali, Om Krim Kali. And it's usually used for protection from evil forces. I will use this one a lot though, because it's short. And, you know, especially if I'm repeating something over and over again, the longer it is, the harder it is to repeat it. So it doesn't have to just be about protection from evil forces. Anytime you're using the deity's name, you're really bringing them. But these are the basic reasons for these different mantras. The second one, Om Kring Kalake Nama, Om Kring Kalake Nama. Again, you can just say it. You could say Om Kring Kalake Nama. I tend to do the intonement because that's how I work. That's how I've been taught. The next one for calling upon her grace, Om Sri Maha Kalikaya Nama, Om Sri Maha Kalikaya Nama. And if you make a mistake, just keep going. You're going to make mistakes because this isn't English. It's something you've never done before. You'll notice that they all start with Om. Om is very popular in Buddhism, but it predates it. It's also part of the Vedic tradition. And it is supposed to be the sound, the primordial sound that creation comes from. So that's why it's used so much. The next one is Om Klim Kalakayai Namaha, Om Klim Kalakayai Namaha, for the relief of complex problems. And then the last one is Om Hrim Shrim Klim Adya Kalika Param Heshwari Swaha. And that one's quite a mouthful. So if you're going to do it over and over again, that's probably not the one to do over and over again, just because it's going to be hard to do over and over again. And if you mispronounce, it's okay. It's about the intention. The idea behind this is the sound, and the repeating of it changes consciousness. So as I said, I will do these, before a meditation, or I'll just repeat one of these over and over and over again, or in Hebrew for Lilith. And then sometimes I'll use these prior to a ritual. So let's say you're going to cast a circle. Well, I might right before or in the middle, I may use one of these mantras to sort of add energy to it. Any questions or comments about the mantras? Okay. So I did want to include a couple of books that are possibilities. There's a lot of books on Kali and a lot of books on Hinduism, obviously. But these are a couple that I've found helpful. So the first one is the Kali Mantra Magic by Bal Kadman. He's a very prolific writer that writes about everything. But I've read his Kali Mantra Magic book. It's short, but it has a lot of mantras and ways to use them. Definitely more knowledgeable than I am on Kali mantras. As I said, I work mostly with Lilith, and I know more there than I do on Kali. But he's got a whole book full of them. There's a book called Shakti Rising, which is very good. It's about Shakti, this idea of the mother goddess, but also as her manifestation of Kali. And this is written by an Indian person. So very, very, and a PhD. And then Devi sorry, I'm not pronouncing this well. Devi Mahatmayam, which is the text that first introduces Kali, that was written in 600 AD. There are various versions of that available on Amazon that are in English that tell the story of Kali. So that could be helpful too. But there's many, many more books that are very helpful, including a lot of Dark Mother books that include not just Kali, but a number of goddesses. For instance, there's a book called She, just the word She, which is about a bunch of Dark Mother goddesses, including Kali and Lilith and Hecate. It's a great book. So just a few books in case there's things you wanted to look at. So that's what I have in the slides and for the presentation. At this point, I'll turn it over to see if you have any questions or comments, either about anything we talked about or anything else.
So I have a question.
Sure.
What draws you to working with dark goddesses as opposed to other kinds of goddesses?
Great question. So for me, it's two things. I came from a Gnostic Kabbalistic tradition, and the dark goddesses, which understand dark does not mean evil. The difference between dark and light is dark is the more wrathful path, the more chaotic path, where light is or bright is the more
slow and easy
path. And I don't mean that easy as in that it's bad, but definitely easier because it's not as chaotic. The dark mother is seen as the faster path to enlightenment by most of these traditions. Like in Hinduism, yeah, you can find enlightenment through, let's say, Lakshmi, the goddess of prosperity. But it's a slower process than letting Kali take a hold of you and shake you up.
If Kali gets a hold of you, she's going to get you to enlightenment far lifetimes ahead of Parvati.
because she's going to push you until you get there. We're like Lakshmi and Parvati and Saraswati are going to do it in a way that's very, whatever pace we can, we want to go at. Where the dark mother is going, she's the kick your butt mother that's going to get you there. I also find the dark mother more, well, and I mean, the big answer is Lilith called to me. I didn't have a choice. But I think the reason I need the dark mother is I had a difficult childhood with a mother who was not a very bright, easy mother. And I really think I don't quite trust, and I don't mean this at a logical mental level. There's a visceral part of me that doesn't trust the light and fluffy. And I think the dark mother came into my life to be sort of like, it's okay that things were difficult. And that can be a really loving way to get there. And the dark mother is not about causing you suffering, but the dark mother is about being there through the suffering and allowing it to happen to get you where you need to be.
Yeah, like when I started Kabbalah and I was only interested in the masculine aspect of deity at that point when I started, 12 or 13 years ago, Lilith just introduced herself into the situation and you don't really have a choice whether, and it just kind of happens versus choosing.
So yeah, I became a Lilith devotee. It's been about 21 years now. I first encountered her when I was like 8, but it's been 21 years now that I've actually been a devotee. And I'll tell you, when she first came back to me, I was a youth pastor in a Christian church. And within 18 months, my whole life was completely different. And she would not let me say no. There was no choice in the matter. And it's been the best thing that's happened in my life. It's not perfect. My life's not perfect. I'm still human. I still have my days of definite ego, but it has changed me so dramatically from who I was. So my message is, if the dark mother calls to you, that's great. If she doesn't, and a different kind of goddess calls you, you know what? That's great too. Or if it's a god, gods are okay too. If you're called to Buddhism, there's forms of Buddhism that are non-deity based, and it's about just consciousness. That's cool too. It's whatever gets you to who you need to be.
I literally thank the dark goddess every single morning when I roll out of bed for every difficulty that she's ever handed me, because they have been my greatest blessings. And she is so kind and so good. But in the midst of chaos, when your ego is really strong in the beginning and it has dominion over your personality, she seems terrifying and afraid and fearful. But there's that saying that Kali is clear brilliance to those who are close to her, but she is dark and terrible to those who are far away. Because
it's our way of seeing.
Yeah.
Because she feels like death, because transformation feels like death.
Mm-hmm.
In the last session, Rachel was saying it's like the death card in tarot. At face value, it seems like the death card means you're going to die, but that's not what it means. It means transformation. And that's how the dark mother is. She's the death card. She really is. I'm in the process. Well, I have a new book that I've been working on that's in edit. It's been in edit forever. But one of the things that she spoke to me was that, in the form of Lilith, because that's who I work with, that she's evolution. She's what pushes us to our spiritual transcendence. And I could go on, but I'll stop there. Other questions, comments? And Robin, if you have others too.
I have a question.
Sure, hold on a second. This volume seems low. Let me turn it up a little. My mouse is not cooperating.
Okay.
Well, you know what? Go ahead. I can't get the volume to go up, so we'll just listen hard.
Okay, I'll try to yell.
Okay, I can hear you.
Oh, better. I've had some negative experiences with different deities years ago that were very intense and controlling and terrifying in a bad way. And
Kali's kind of called out to me, and
Mhm.
I want to work with her, but I'm intimidated. I'm spooked because of my past experiences, and you know, I'm just not sure how to go on.
So I totally get that. Because first of all, bad experience we've had either with entities or humans can definitely make us not want to go there again. And the Dark Mothers are intimidating because they're, when the male gods are scared of them, you got to wonder, right? So I recommend to people go slow. Don't, and I'm not saying you're going to do this, but don't, put up an image with, severed heads all around it and start doing a meditation around death. That's probably not where you want to start. I would start, and I don't know, do you work with any other deities that you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I work with Anubis and Bridget.
Okay, and Anubis is definitely a deity that deals with death and the afterlife. Bridget or Brigid is more of spring life. You know her better than I do, but that's another way to get in with the deity, is to put, if you have an altar or you want to set something up where you have an image of one of the other gods you work with, put an image, it doesn't have to be on the altar. It can be. Some people hesitate to put multiple deities on an altar. I do it all the time, but if you're uncomfortable, you can put it under the altar or next to the altar, and literally have one of the deities you're working with introduce you. And I don't mean that's like, hey, Brigid, and Brigid says, hey, here's Kali, you know what I mean? That's not exactly like that. But what I mean is start however you work with Brigid or or Bridget or Anubis, do that, and then ask to be introduced to Kali. And that way you're going to get a better connection with an aspect of her that works with what you're working with already, than if you just go straight to her without that intervention. I do that with Lilith all the time. Like, I'll put a different deity on the altar with her. She knows she's number one because I've got 4 altars in here covered in her stuff. So if I take one statue off and put, like, let's say Hathor on the altar, she knows I'm not replacing her. And that's not my consciousness, my intention, but I will do that. And I will sort of ease into this other deity, so it's not just a cold hit. So that's one way to do it, where you work with the deities you're working with and then sort of include. Another thing that you can do is I found that reading maybe about other ways where people work with them and getting a little more comfortable can help at least take away some of the fear, because people will tell you that Kali can be scary, but she's also in Kali as Kali Ma. She's definitely a mother that nurtures. And so you'll hear people say that she is the greatest force of love and protection they've ever come across.
The sweetest, kindest, most beneficent. Like, we have a friend in Trinidad who has a Kali temple, and little children play around her statues.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not some terrible evil,
right,
in any way.
So a couple ideas: reading some other people's experiences where they are working with her a little less intense, introducing her with your other work so that it's not just a cold connection. And the other thing, as I said, is, get an image and sit with it. Don't invoke or do a full-on ritual to start with. Just a sitting with it and being like, hey, I mean, I've obviously in consciousness, not literally, but make that little bit of a connection and see where it goes. That makes it a little easier to start.
Okay, so like meditate kind of thing.
Yes. And maybe even just a short, 10 minutes sitting in front of a picture and looking at the picture and saying, I'm interested in connecting with you, and do that, for 4 days instead of doing an hour the first time and frying yourself out on it.
Yeah, do 20 minutes every day for 9 days. 9 is a sacred number to the goddess. Do it for 9 days, every day for 9 days as an introduction.
Even 10 minutes.
Yeah. find a mantra of hers that is for love and protection, and just say that mantra until it literally becomes like a thought revolving in your head. And find one of her merciful ones.
Yeah, Kali Ma being one of the more,
Mhm.
the manifestations that are much more less scary.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And if you have questions, by the way, anybody on here, if you have questions, we do have a website, and if I can get my I got it. So it's circulusmatrum.com, which is Latin for circle of the mother. It's actually circle of the dark mother, but I didn't want the URL to be 50 characters long. You can go to our website, and there's some information on a bunch of different stuff. Not some of it's deep, some of it's not, but you can also find my email, and you can email me, and then I can, also go to Brandon and James too. So if you have any questions, or you try some of this and are like, it didn't work or it sucked, reach out to me and we can give you more help too.
Yay, thank you. Good to know.
Sure, absolutely. And by the way, everything we do is free when it comes to the circle. Meetings are always free. Any kind of help, is free. I mean, obviously I have a day job, so I can't, do hours and hours. For me, the only thing I charge is once in a while I do classes for Witch Lab that are full on, like 2-hour classes on Kabbalah. And we charge for that. I don't take any of the money. It goes to Witch Lab to keep them running. They're doing well, but I just like to give back. Brandon and James do have have services around readings and spells and other stuff they do too. But these meetings and any information I give to you is free. So don't worry that I'm going to rope you into some kind of, if you pay me $9.99, I'll give you everything. Anything I got, I'll if I've got an article on it, I'll send it to you. And if you don't know, I am the author of the book Embracing Lilith, which is available at Witch Lab through Amazon. That does cost because we have to print it. But if you're interested in Lilith, I did write that book. So other questions about Kali or anything else anybody wanted to talk about? Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. Always fun to share and talk about these kind of things. Our next meeting will be the first Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time in December. We don't do a January meeting only because it's so close to New Year's, but then February will pick up again. And as I said, that may be in person and online. On our website, you can also find our YouTube channel where I post the videos of these meetings. So thank you so much. And, take care. And if you need anything, please write.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for being here.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
Good night.